I'm David Merritt.
And I'm Francine Lacqua.
And this is In the City, Bloomberg's podcast connecting you to the conversations at the heart of the city of London. But of course, that is not where we are this week, Francine.
It is not, Dave, because this week we're in Doha, Qatar for the Qatar Economic Forum.
Exactly. And we have spent the last few days listening to the world's business leaders, or if you are Francine, interrogating them on stage most of the time. And many of them have been emphasizing the importance of the Middle East to all of their future plans.
And that's really what we heard from the Standard Chartered Chief Executive Officer, Bill Winters.
I think the various countries in the Gulf, of course, are accumulating savings right now, and they're diversifying their economy. So that's why we're here. That's why we're investing so much capital into the Middle East, because we see these huge opportunities to connect that capital with all the opportunities in Asia and vice versa.
And when we spoke with Ken Moelis, Chief Executive Officer of investment bank Moelis & Company, he really spoke highly of the ambition and pro-business attitude of the Middle East right now.
When you come here, and I encourage everybody who hasn't been, it's optimistic, it's energetic, it's pro-business. And the enthusiasm and optimism and desire to grow the region is really invigorating. And yes, I believe the region has a bright future and is almost on the opposite cycle of the West right now.
Well, because they have so much money. If you think about, of course, some of these Gulf nations, because of the new energy complex, they have quite a lot of cash to spend. So if you're an investor, if you're looking for an anchor investor, or if you just want to make M&A deals, this is where you show up.
And it's been completely packed with people here over the last few days. Astonishing crowds, amazing speakers. So what we were trying to understand is all this energy and the crowds, do these point to the fact that this region is really emerging as one of the leading financial centers in the world?
So Dave, that's really what we're looking at this week, the growing influence of the Middle East.
Yeah, there's the capital it has, whether its ambitions might see this region and all of the major players here compete finally with the likes of New York or our dear London.
So we have a reporter on the ground. He breaks more news than anyone we know.
Absolutely. He is a top deals reporter for us at Bloomberg. He's called Dinesh Nair, based in London, previously based out here in the Middle East. And he sat down with us amongst the melee of all the people in the reception hall yesterday afternoon here in Qatar. And we wanted to understand what he's picking up from all of the conversations he has with the bankers and the executives here at the forum. And this energy that he says is really not so common to find in London anymore.
There's not a lot of places in the world today where there is this kind of capital. So that is the differentiating fact. That's why you see a lot of people coming in, because at the time when everyone had money, there's a lot of liquidity. This region was probably not that significant, but today it is. It is probably the only place which can call the shots on big transactions, and they're spending it worldwide. And what I've realized over the years is that they used to invest in places where they were familiar with earlier. So that's why you saw the investments in Canary Wharf for like big European banks. Today, that money is kind of spread out everywhere. And you would argue that it's going a little bit more into emerging markets and big emerging markets like China and India. But the US also remains a pretty important place where the capital is getting deployed. As someone told me the other day that, the region is interesting because it's one of the few places in the world where ambition is kind of married with capital. And if you look at many places, going back to London, even the ambition part is quite arguable these days, but there's definitely no capital. And when you have that both combined, I think you'll see some interesting things develop. And you'll see a lot of firms in London, a lot of bankers, investment banks, hedge funds moving people here, which is quite unprecedented.
So I was surprised, and actually, so you have these, beautiful hotels, a lot of the brands, frankly, that we know in London or elsewhere, the best of the best. You have these beautiful restaurants, but largely it's empty. So a lot of this here in Doha, Qatar, was built for the World Cup, and they just don't have. I was looking at the population, so they have 2.6 million people overall, but I think around only 400,000 Qataris.
It's like it's crowded here today. Yeah. But when we arrived the weekend, and that airport, which is like a town on its own, but there's not enough people to fill it, and a lot of these big offices buildings around here are empty. So is it kind of more show than substance?
I think every country in the Gulf today wants to attract people to come to their country and set up investments and set up their offices. But there is competition among everybody, like between Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. So that's a challenge. And I'm sure, like, if you're a Qatar, you are thinking of what you want to do with this infrastructure. I think at the panel, the CEO of QIA did kind of hint that we are thinking about what do we do with this infrastructure, which is essentially cost them billions of dollars to build, but they need to ensure that people are coming here, which is, again, there is a lot of competition between these countries to attract people.
So I was reading it, and again, I find this incredible, right? The Lionel Messi, were you reading the story?
Yes.
I mean,
400
million, right? To
go to Saudi. Right? Yeah.
I mean, what is it?
They already have Ronaldo there.
But this is incredible. I mean, this is what?
This is kind of cultural icons, right, to move into the region.
Yes.
To get people then to live in their new cities? Like, what are we talking about, Dinesh?
We're talking about quite a few things. In the case of Lionel Messi, I mean, there's this huge ambition to create sports investments and to do more investments in sports for Saudi Arabia. But it's also like they do want to create some headlines which tells the world that this is a place where you can come in and live. And even today, I mean, it is quite questionable whether, people would be willing to live in Saudi Arabia or Riyadh, but it is changing. It is changing at a pace which we've not seen in the past. Still, I mean, they find it a bit more challenging. So unless they get these kind of big names out there.
But why bring them there? I mean, they already own the PIF. I mean, if the PIF already owns Newcastle and they're winning trophies,
right. So
why do you need to do, domestically? Is it for really to attract outside talent, or is it influence? Because to have influence, you can buy something else outside your country.
A lot of what Saudi Arabia is doing in sports and in entertainment has a long-term objective to ensure that the capital stays in Saudi. So when they spend...
That's a new thing, right?
It is very much a new thing.
This is like future-proofing their economy.
It's future. Right? They're thinking like 10, 15 years down the line. And they realized this during COVID when people in Saudi were not traveling. The figures we heard was that around $50 billion stayed in Saudi, kind of lifted the local stock markets. So now they're saying if we can get our population, our young population, if you attract them with things they like, which is music, sports,
right.
So then it makes a lot of sense for them to ensure that people are staying there. The capital is not going out at a pace which used to go.
You mentioned the competition between the different cities, which I find fascinating here as well. Everyone trying to vie to be the hub. Obviously, Dubai is kind of in a different league, but I thought the optics today was amazing. Francine did a panel on energy, and the Qatari energy minister walked in with the Saudi energy minister holding hands.
Yeah, I think it was Iraq.
These are countries which were, and there was a bit of banter between the Saudi on the stage and the emir about the friendliness, and forgetting that just a few years ago things were very ugly between these countries.
I think, in my 14, 15 years of covering the Middle East, I've never seen a time in the region when there's been so much political stability in the region. So they've obviously kissed hands with Qatar. They have a deal with Israel. You can think of, I couldn't think of the fact that when I was living in Dubai, you could take a plane to Israel. It was Tel Aviv. It was like completely it was not even a question. Like you didn't even talk about it. Nobody. So now today there are flights going from Dubai to Israel. So Egypt is a friend. Turkey is a friend. Yemen war is kind of, seems like it is ending. So there is quite a bit of political stability. They are, in a way, decoupling a bit from the US. They understand that they need to have more friends. So, the fact that China was apparently trying to mediate a deal between Saudi and Iran was unheard of. They're doing a lot more with India. So I think they understand that the world they need to be friends with a lot more people. And the political stability, when they have that, is when this region will flourish. Now, it's still a very fragile place, but you never know. But
Is this a friendship of convenience to get jobs from London? And we had Nick Candy on the podcast.
Right. Yeah. He was pretty clear, right?
He did a couple of headlines.
They did a couple of headlines. I think it was like our most read story from our podcast. It was just, Dubai is the new London, right? Like London's over. Yeah. Everyone with money or wants to buy a super luxury house, they want to do it in Dubai.
I just think Dubai is one of the new capitals of the world. I genuinely think that you're seeing a flow of money there like you've never seen before. It was like London when we were building One Hyde Park.
Sounded like a business pitch.
Yeah, he's got a big development there, right?
Yeah. No, I was in Dubai a couple of weeks back and spent a week there reporting, and what was funny was like I met a lot of people from Britain and US, and a lot of them have said like this place is where we want to be. We want to belong here because met a lot of investment bankers. A, there's more deal activity. B, Dubai has proven like with COVID that it's such a convenient place to live. Really didn't shut down. It's easy. They find the time zones quite attractive. You can do stuff in Asia. Europe is just 6 hours away. So I think the times and the fact that the infrastructure is so amazing and world class that it's just makes it a better place, I guess. Yeah.
There's worry about what they're doing in terms of, sanction invasions, or certainly, welcoming a lot of Russian money with open arms. There's questions about what they do with crypto, what's regulated. Is it 50-50, or do you really think that, there are more positives than negatives to attract foreign capital?
I've always been quite a pessimist when it comes to some of the stuff I've seen in the Middle East over the years. But I think when I went this time, I was feeling even in the war in Ukraine gets over, I'm not sure a lot of the wealthy Russians are moving out of
so they're going to stay.
They're going to stay, yeah. And Dubai needed that more desperately than most of the other Emirates, so there's a lot more money. Dubai had to have a system where people lived there and stayed. And it just feels like they have, at least for so now, at least this far, managed to do that.
So the bankers you're talking to, and I know you spend your life talking to bankers, right? And we know that deals have dried up in London, right? We've talked about it a lot on this podcast. People have had to sit on their hands. The London Stock Exchange has had a pretty bad few years in terms of listings. Is there kind of buzz in the Middle East now? What are the bankers telling us about this kind of battle between the financial centres that Dubai is coming out on top? Is it the place to be?
I think the bankers in Dubai and the Middle East find themselves more relevant today than ever any time in the past. A couple of things. One is that the local activity is improving because there's a lot more IPOs, a lot of deal activity. And the other thing is, again, the fact we talked about is that the region's sovereign wealth funds are deploying capital worldwide. And if you are a JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs banker based in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, today you're getting calls from all your colleagues worldwide, asking them to pitch deals to these funds, actually. So they feel more relevant. And you can see that the conversation is more global than what it was a few years back when people talk about local deals.
Dinesh, is it quality bankers and quality lawyers that they have, or do they have to bring in their top people? Are they moving some of the more senior staff from London to the region?
Yeah, that's one other thing I noticed. The quality of people definitely increasing. The conversations I probably had around 30 meetings when I was in Dubai over the span of 5 days, and the quality of those conversations were pretty much at the same standard as you would find in London, and that's a big change. I've been in meetings where, towards the end of it, my mind was like, how do you get this job in the past? I was like, but
we've all had that.
I can all those meetings, actually. But today it is a lot different, actually. So, and not just with the bankers, but if you see the evolution of some of the sovereign wealth funds, like talk to ADIA, the Mubadala, so when QIA, they're so much more organized and so much more structured in the way they invest. And one thing I do appreciate, like with even this big pot of money and people calling them for deals, they're very particular on what they want. So they're saying no to almost 90% of the deals which are shown to them and only picking the stuff which they really want.
That's the thing people always talk about, isn't it, in terms of like London's dominance is about the ecosystem. Well, no one else can match it. It's the lawyers, it's the whole of the infrastructure around the city, not just the bankers. But it sounds like what you're saying, Dinesh. And I guess looking around here at this event is that is changing. That the Middle East is building its own ecosystem to support really serious financial centers.
Yeah, I still don't think they're at the level at which London is still at. But London's taken several years to build that. But here, it's happening at a more rapid pace. But there definitely seems like that's the ambition. They're thinking like 10, 20 years, like every meeting you have, they're talking very long term. So the game is like, what do we do? So you see the hedge funds coming in, and a lot of them are actually managing money. Ray Dalio moved his family office to Abu Dhabi. You're talking about some of the smartest people in the world, so his own money is getting managed out of Abu Dhabi today. Yes, they have deep connections, and he's got a lot of money from Abu Dhabi before, but that's also quite telling. He didn't have to do this, so he's doing that now.
What kind of deals do you think Middle Eastern money is trying to chase? I feel, right from the sidelines, that there's been this always attraction between the Middle East and the UK because they have crown jewels. Yeah. And it's, a lot of big banks, it's the football clubs, it could be banks like Standard Chartered. There was this rumor. Do you think will regulators allow that? What do they want from the UK?
No, I think those type of deals are changing. So they're not chasing trophy assets for the sake of chasing trophy assets. I mean, yes, there will be the occasional football club deal, which will always happen. But
everyone would love a football club.
Exactly.
Dave's been after one for years.
Yeah, I'm about to make a bid.
With the Amex.
Yeah. Probably that's a good idea, actually.
Comment on it.
Yeah. No, but the types of deals are definitely changing. They are looking at deals which are more on the tech side, healthcare, technology, tech-enabled industries, and that's where the money is going. I mean, yes, there will be obviously one or two of those deals which will be politically driven or motivated by broader ambitions, but more so they're behaving more like pretty sophisticated, mature institutions.
Dinesh, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to this week's In the City. We'll be back next week.
But in the meantime, if you like our show, please head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe.
This episode was hosted by me, David Merritt.
And me, Francine Lacqua.
It was produced by Summer Sadi and Moses Andam.
Additional editing by Blake Maples.
Special thanks to Dinesh Nair.